Good morning.
Good morning.
So right now I'm showing 3 members. Are there any members in the conference room, Carl?
No, there are not.
Okay.
I see Mr. Alejo, I see Mr. Pacheco, I see you, Mike, and we're looking for one more. And there's Yaneli, just joined us.
Awesome.
So we
I will call this meeting to order at 9:01 a.m. Can we have a roll call, please?
Okay, City of Delray Oaks. City of Greenfield. Yaneli's here. It looks like maybe she's on mute. City of King City.
Present.
City of Marina. City of Quayside.
Here.
And County of Monterey.
Here.
Okay, you have a quorum.
Thank you, everyone. We'll now move on. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak on any item not on the agenda? Again, I'll ask, is there any member of the public who could speak on any item not on the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to item number 3, the consent agenda. Does any committee member want to pull any item from the consent agenda? Is there any member of the public who'd like to speak on the consent agenda? Again, I'll ask any member of the public who could speak on the consent agenda. Hearing and seeing none, I'll bring this back to the committee for action.
Move approval.
Second.
First with Alejo, second with Pacheco. Roll call, please.
Okay, roll call. Director Martinez,
Yes, sorry about that. I've been having some issues with the mic.
oh, okay, thank you. And Director LeVar,
Aye.
Director Pacheco,
Aye.
Director Alejo.
Aye.
Thank you, the motion passed.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 4-1, review of administrative performance. Let's go to Carl.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And just going through a few items for you that are more administrative related versus operations. If you look at the performance dashboards, beginning, let's see, performance dashboards, if you look at our fare box recovery ratio, we're at through March, July through March, we're still only at 8% fare box recovery. That's the amount of fares that cover our expenses. And our minimum for that's a state mandate, is 15% to be eligible to receive state funding. The state has lifted that requirement as part of COVID, but fares bring in a good 10 million or so per year to MST, and for us to be at half of or more than half of where we were pre-COVID, that represents a significant hit in dollars and shows you where we're using some of those COVID relief funds. Federal funds have been backstopping and filling in for those lost revenues that we would normally be generating in fares. So it's important that we keep on monitoring that and advocating at the state level to continue the abeyance of the fare box recovery rule for receipt of state funds. Our costs are inching upward compared to last year. That is absolutely related to the increase of fuel that we started seeing this half of the year since January, and the aggressive actions by Russia and the Ukraine, creating a worldwide issues and spikes in oil prices and fuel prices. Fortunately, though, we're still below budget. We did a good job of budgeting for the year. So, and this happened late enough in the year that we don't see this impacting us through the end of this fiscal year. We'll still be all right as we project out, and you'll get a report on that later in this agenda as we present the draft budget for the next 2 years. From our safety statistics, our fixed route continues to be above standard, above our minimum standard. We're not exceeding our maximum standard, but still doing well. Our MV services are still below standard, and we're continuing to work with them on trying to get those numbers up. From a reliability standpoint, we're doing fine. From a cash standpoint, we continue to be doing well as far as securing cash from the CARES, CARISA, and the Affordable Care, or the American Recovery Act, and other acts. So from cash perspective, we do have at least a good 2 years or so before I think we need to be concerned about our cash flow. And we're using our funds quickly. Those federal funds are being used quickly. We saw some runs recently, some runs made at Department of Agriculture and at the FAA level, attempting to claw back some of these unspent COVID relief funds from the federal government. So we've been encouraged to get those monies encumbered and spent, and that is occurring as well. Elsewhere, from an administrative standpoint, we continue to see growth in our contactless fare payment system. As ridership is coming back, our real-time systems continue to grow. Those are the systems that people use, our online apps and other tools to help passengers find their way through our system. That's beginning to come back. So we're seeing a slight recovery It's going to be limited though by the ability of the hospitality to hire back to full employment where they were pre-COVID. They are struggling to hire, just as everybody else is. And we are in the process of negotiating some agreements with the various the state colleges and the community colleges. And we've seen enrollment drop off, especially hard at both CSUMB and at Hartnell. That is impacting our ridership with those partnerships. But as enrollment comes back, we, along with employment, we hope over the next year or two to see that ridership come back and the fare revenue come back. And, it's all really dependent now though on the next variant and where that brings us. So it's still a little bit up in the air. But all in all, performance is as good as we can expect and comparable, if not better than our peers. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Carl. Committee members, any questions or comments? Is there any member of the public who'd like to speak on this item? Again, I'll ask any member of the public who'd like to speak on this item. Hearing and seeing none, I'll bring this back to committee. Just one quick comment, Carl. So here in King City with the Hartnell College, we've had some community concerns regarding parking with the expansion of the college itself. But I think it also lends itself an amazing opportunity as MST rolls out the new routes when we get to that point, to coordinate with Hartnell College to use them to encourage their students to use the circular buses instead of driving to school, especially those within town, because that would also alleviate some parking issues. And I think it'd be another way to highlight how public transit also benefits the community, because reducing those parking issues obviously reduces vehicle miles traveled, affects air quality, etc. So thank you. We'll now move on to item 4-2, receive a state legislative advocacy update. Michelle.
Good morning, committee members. Michelle Overmeyer, Director of Planning and Innovation. My staff report is on page 101 of the full agenda package. And this morning, I'm going to focus on the state budget and where we're at there. So to recap, in January, the governor released his proposed $286 billion budget for this coming fiscal year 22 to 23 and indicated about a $45 billion surplus, which included about $20 billion available for discretionary spending. The state legislative analyst's office is indicating the surplus might be even more than that. In March, the governor introduced his $11 billion plan to ease the pain that Californians are experiencing due to high gas prices. This $11 billion plan includes $750 million for public transit operators to access if they want to offer free transit for 3 months. Details of that free transit program are still being fine-tuned, but it would be voluntary for public transit operators to opt into, and it would need to start within 60 days of the governor signing the budget this coming June. In January, the Senate released the second phase of the Senate budget plan. They're calling Putting Wealth to Work. Additional details of that plan were released last week, and this proposal is for $20 billion to be invested in infrastructure over 4 years. The package covers 4 years, with years 3 and 4 being funded upon appropriation. It includes language to ensure strong labor requirements accompany this significant investment in infrastructure to create stable, high quality, high road job opportunities across the state. And while it does focus on road projects, it does include $13 billion over 4 years for transit infrastructure, $2.9 billion over 4 years for climate investments, including active transportation projects, $2.1 billion over 4 years for freight and workforce investments, and then $1.25 billion over 4 years for congestion mitigation, bridge repair, and replacement. So overall, I'd say that the elected officials at the state level acknowledge the importance of public transit, and we'll be seeing that in these spending priorities coming up. And because there is a significant surplus identified in the state budget right now for the coming year, we'll be seeing designation of funds for specific local projects that are supported by the Senate and Assembly members. And as you know, one of MST's priority projects is the Surf Bus Rapid Transit project. And it will support state goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We're chipping away at the funding gap right now for the construction phase of the project. We've submitted a $25 million grant request to the state's Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. And we should find out next month if we're going to be awarded funds. In the meantime, we're also pursuing a state earmark. So we've talked to both Senator John Laird and Assemblymember Mark Stone about the project. They're very supportive. Senator Laird has indicated that he will include MST's project in the district's budget requests. And if it's approved, it'll show up in the state budget next month. So we'll continue to monitor state funding. The governor's going to release his May revision this coming Friday. And next week, Carl and I will be in Sacramento at the California Transit Association's Spring State Legislative Conference. And it's my hope that the next time I come before this committee, I'll have some good news to report on those discretionary funding awards. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Michelle. And then I also want to personally thank you for giving Congresswoman Lothgren a tour of the South County Operations and Maintenance Facility. That was greatly appreciated and you did a great job.
Thank you. It was nice to have her out there.
Yeah, yes, it was. Committee members, any questions or comments? Is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item? Again, I'll ask, is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item? Hearing and seeing none, I'll bring this back to the committee. One quick comment regarding the gas rebates that you just spoke about. I know it's probably difficult, but it would have been nice if the state thought about using as incentive where if someone would rather take a voucher worth twice as much, apply it towards bus passes or transit passes, or take the one-time payment of half the amount to further encourage individuals in California to use public transit as a preferred mode of transportation. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 4-3, receive federal legislative update. This is Carl and Don Gilchrist. Don, great to see you.
Good morning, great to see you.
I'm just going to turn it to Don.
Thank you, Carl. Yeah, Don Gilchrist with Thomas Walters and Associates. Good to be back with the committee to give you a little update on federal issues. If you could advance to the next slide, please. On the federal level, we're really focused in on funding issues in the budget right now. The president submitted his budget to Congress at the end of March. That was about 2 months late, and the House and Senate appropriators have been struggling, working very hard to try to make up that lost ground to see if we can get these bills enacted this year. The subcommittees on the appropriations committees have been holding hearings on the 12 different bills and receiving requests. The goal is to try to get these marked up at the subcommittee level in June, hopefully, maybe July, and get as many of them passed by the House and the Senate before the end of the summer. And that sets us up to be able to finish things up in the fall if they can do that. Now, the next step in the process is usually adoption of a budget resolution to set the overall parameters of the appropriations bills. That is required by federal budget law. However, there's no penalty if Congress does not do this, and it's looking likely that they'll skip the step this time around. They still have to come to some sort of agreement, though, on what the overall spending levels are so that the appropriators can write their bills. And right now, the chairs and the ranking members have been meeting to try to work that out. It's really an important step. It's necessary because we have to have at least some Republican support in the Senate in order for these to get passed. If they don't get some Republican support for the bills, they won't be able to finalize them and get them enacted. So we've been working directly with the appropriations committees on programs and projects that are important to MST. Also working with our House and Senate delegation, and also working with other transit stakeholders. The issues that are at the top of the list are on this slide here is bus and bus facilities program funding. We want to see additional funding for those programs. We also are asking for increased capital investment grants program funding. And this is important for the SURF, busway and BRT program. Congress is again going through the process of selecting projects for community project funding, or in the Senate, they call it congressionally designated funding. We used to refer to these as earmarks, and we have submitted requests for support to our senators and to Representative Panetta for an MST project that would include zero emission bus acquisition, charging infrastructure, and some pre-construction work on a renewable energy microgrid. Apart from these appropriations issues, we're also continuing to lobby for S3011. This is a COVID-19 flexibility bill. Under ARPA, a lot of money was provided to state and local governments for COVID response and recovery. S3011 would provide additional flexibility in the use of that money, so it could be used for a lot of different infrastructure type things, including public transit. So we want to see this signed into law. Senator Padilla has been a real leader on this in the Senate. Representative Panetta has also agreed to co-sponsor the House version. But I don't think this is the type of bill that will move through on its own, although the Senate did pass this last October. It hasn't come up in the House. And so we're looking at trying to attach it to some other bill that's moving through Congress to see if we can get this enacted. Next slide, please. I just wanted to reassure the board that we're continuing to pay attention to the implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. And FTA has been moving ahead with this year. In April, they did the full year apportionments for formula programs, 4 to 6 different formula programs with significant increases. The big one, which is the urbanized area formula program, was increased by 29% compared to last year. And there's also grant opportunities for which you can compete. And I know your staff is looking at these carefully, but in March, FTA issued the funding notices for the low and no emission bus program and for the bus and bus facilities program. And these grant competitions will close at the end of May. So we want to keep close tabs on these things and anything else related to the infrastructure bill to see what we can obtain for MST for your priorities of your projects. Next slide, please. I'll conclude there and be happy to respond to any comments or questions you may have.
Committee members, any comments or questions? Is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item? Again, I'll ask, is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item? Hearing and seeing none, I'll bring this back to the committee. Thank you, Don. We appreciate the work that you're doing and we appreciate the updates. With that, we'll move on to item number 4-4, review the draft FY23 and 24 operating capital budget summary. Lisa?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. First of all, everything that you just heard from Carl, Michelle, and Dawn is in this report this morning. So our recommendation is to review the draft FY23 and 24 operating and capital budget summary, although I'll be focusing mostly on the FY23 operating budget. So with the continued uncertainty of the economy, with regard to the pandemic, staffing shortages, especially with coach operators, Russian aggression against Ukraine, supply chain shortages, fuel increases, insurance increases. There's a lot going on, and some might compare preparing this year's budget to and the uncertainties to a game of whack-a-mole. And still, the draft operating budget for FY23 is $58.6 million, which is an increase from this current year's budget. So first off, I'm going to go through the revenue side and then the expenditure side to give you a flavor of where the draft budget is at the moment. With the retail sales taxes that we receive for transportation, specifically with the local transportation fund, as well as Measure Q funds, these typically make up about 60% of our budget, and these revenues have been steady with a 2% increase. And the Measure Q funds, of course, are the 1/8 cent sales tax that the voters approved in November of 2014 for our special populations, including seniors, people with disabilities, and veterans. With regard to fares from passengers, we are assuming that those fares will increase with the implementation of the comprehensive operational analysis final network plan. It's a mouthful. And the potential fare increase that we're currently contemplating, as well as cross our fingers, return to hospitality jobs and the conferences that are associated with that. We anticipate ridership to increase and therefore fares to increase. With regard to partnerships with military universities and the city of Monterey, funding from these have been historically strong. However, Carl did mention partnerships earlier this morning. The city of Monterey is interested in and has asked for service for the trolley services June 25th through Labor Day. So those are planned to return. The University and College Partnership Program will continue with moderate financial contributions, as you'll see later on the board agenda today. And then the Presidio of Monterey and Naval Postgraduate School partnerships have largely discontinued, representing very little revenue in terms of what we can expect over the next year. With regard to federal aid, Dawn talked a little bit about that. We have largely utilized all the special federal aid money that we received over the last couple of years in relation to the pandemic. And so in FY23, we're not counting on any special federal aid due to coronavirus. However, with the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that just passed, and last month, the board approved $13 million in traditional FTA Section 5307 monies, which is about a 47% increase over the previous year. Now, switching gears to the expenditure side of things, with all of the different impacts from supply chain and fuel and insurance, et cetera, we have addressed these with regard to expenditures. Coach operator wages and overtime are usually the largest source of expense within our operating budget, and we've accounted for a 3% wage increase as per the contractual agreement between MST and the union as approved by the board in 2019. Notably, with regard to the staffing shortages, when we have those, overtime wages do increase. So you'll see that in the final budget when it comes to the board in June. And then also insurance and fuel increases have hit our expenditures as well. So overall, MST will need to pull about $5 million from our unrestricted cash balance, which is currently $41 million, to support this next year's budget. And then on the capital side, MST relies mostly on grants and special funds to support the capital budget, supporting the larger investments in vehicles, transitioning to zero emission buses, as well as continuing major transit investments, including the SURF project, Salinas operations and maintenance facility, and maintaining existing infrastructure and facilities in a state of good repair. So with that, I'd like to recognize Andrea Williams, who is our accounting and budget manager, who puts so much time and energy and detail into our budget. What we'll be doing next is having a public hearing at the June agenda per MST bylaws to hear public comments on the budget and recommend that the board adopt the budget for the next fiscal year. I'll stop there and answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Andrea. Committee members, any questions or comments? Is there any member of the public who'd like to speak on this item? Again, I'll ask, is there any member of the public who'd like to speak on this item? Hearing and seeing none, I'll bring it back to the committee. We just want to thank you, Lisa, Andrea, and the MST staff for doing such a great job when it comes to our finances and exemplary performance when it comes to finding those grant opportunities and bringing those back to our district. Thank you again. With that, give me a moment. We do not have a closed session item, so that will conclude our meeting today. We'll adjourn this meeting at 9:28 a.m. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, and we'll be bringing the session back up live at about 9:55, about 5 minutes prior to 10 o'clock start. You can rejoin us right here.